Today is 9/11, the 11th day of September, and some dates are significant in history. This, surely, is one of them. My name is Dr. Kajit John Paul, and today I would reflect on three crucial occurrences that happened on the 11th of September. The first would be the declaration of the New World Order and the subsequent events that corresponded with this date. And the next is the framing of the concept of the struggle for equality by Mahatma Gandhi in 1906 on this day as well. And finally, I'll talk about the struggles of different peoples for equality across the world around this time, which is happening as we speak. And I'm speaking about these three events in the context of the need to promote the concept of reorganizing the world to become more equal, more just, more sustainable, and more peaceful. First of all, 9/11, the American context. In 1990, on the 11th of September, in the build-up to the Gulf War, Persian Gulf War, involvement of America and other countries, President Bush declared the New World Order, where it was basically a declaration against the aggression of Iraq over Kuwait, who had invaded Kuwait at the time. And there was a coalition of several countries led by the United States, significantly funded by Saudi Arabia, to send the invading Iraqi forces back. And the context of that declaration was within the framework of, connected, so to say, with an address on the American budget deficit. So you could see it was an address to the joint session of Congress on the Persian Gulf crisis and the budget deficit. And you would see that President Bush repeatedly made reference to the need for America not to rely on foreign oil. He also made the point that it would not be a good idea for a person, a dictator, so to say, like Saddam Hussein, to have control over significant portions of the world's oil reserve. Well, they call it the world's oil reserves, not the Iraqi or Kuwaiti oil reserves. So you can see there was an interconnection between the economic policies and the stability of world oil supplies and control. It's about some of those issues are involved in these declarations. Well, a year later, exactly on the same day, 11th of September, the same President, George Bush, declared that the New World Order is a big idea. It was more than one for a small country. And he went ahead to mention Latin America and other parts of the world, the whole world, where there is a struggle for equality, liberty, connecting it with the foundation of the American ideal. Well, many ideas which initially start up entirely altruistic or supposedly altruistic sometimes assume the garments of imperialism. And so it so happens that this concept of the New World Order has been interpreted by many as another way of promoting European American-led Western imperialism against the rest of the world, hegemony, so to say. And we could see that he made reference to the cooperation between the Soviet Union at the time with the United States, and he said if these two can cooperate, there is no reason why alliances and progress cannot be made. But you will see a critique of that is that at the heart of that construct of the New World Order was the employment of force. Force was pivotal. Also, reference to the American founding brings up different issues like what happened to the indigenous people, the Native Americans. Well, humanity is in a constant struggle to build models and constructs that aspire to justice and equality, but it's our duty to identify the lapses of these visions, to revise them and propose alternatives that are more credible. Another event which happened, this number 2, on the 11th of September was the framing of the construct of Satyagraha by Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, popularly known as Mahatma Gandhi. That was his name. Mahatma is the title for a holy man in Hindu religion. It came within the context of the struggle for equality by Indian immigrants into South Africa under the Apartheid regime. They met in 1906 and tried to articulate a resistance against a law that was going to be passed to restrict Indian movements into different places and what they could do, what they could not do. And they saw this as an insult to humanity and to the Indian, not just the migrant Indian who had gone to South Africa, but to the Indian in the motherland as well. So they came up with the concept of Satyagraha, Satya, which means truth, love of truth, and Agraha, which means firm. So he defined Satyagraha to mean the force which is born of truth and love, or non-violence. And non-violence is quite central to Gandhi's construct of Satyagraha. By the way, the concept of Satyagraha was coined by Gandhi because he thought the idea of passive resistance, which was used by the Englishmen in South Africa at the time to define their struggle, was inappropriate because passive resistance, he said, was for the weak who had no alternatives. But he said Satyagraha and the quest, the movement of the Indians at the time in South Africa was not a weak movement, no. That's why the idea of firm came in. And he also said the use of passive resistance was a foreign language, a foreign, ascription. So to get a name that would resonate with the community, it was meant for what would be more appropriate. That's why Satyagraha was coined. Of course, after publishing calling for ideas from the Indian Opinion, a magazine in South Africa at the time. We know very well how Gandhi, of course, suffered a detention. He was beaten at times, but he still held on and led the struggle right to the very end. Central to the concept of Satyagraha, which he distinguished from passive resistance and other forms of resistance, is non-violence, ahimsa. First, do no harm. And in a way, you can see the influence of Gandhi over Martin Luther King Jr. and other people who have struggled for some sort of emancipation, equality, liberty, or the other across the world. So today, 11th of September, is a day for which we remember that. Connected to these are two crucial events I would like to draw our attention to that are happening and have been highlighted by the media in the last few days. First, on the 8th of this month, September, the Guarani-Kaiowa people in Brazil protested because they allege they are being systematically killed and deprived of access to their ancestral homelands. Well, I think it all started when a youth leader leading the move to reoccupy their ancestral lands was shot, and that brought out thousands of them to protest. I guess they might still be there. And you would see that the quest to repossess, to be recognized as being entitled to their homelands by the Brazilian state, is the central objective. And related to similar to the Brazilian Guarani-Kaiowa people struggle are some 270 Australian indigenous communities which have been threatened with closure by the Australian government. And this was reported yesterday, 10th of September, on Al Jazeera. Now these people have lived, they have occupied these lands, and over such a long period of time, over 50,000 years, according to the reports here. 50,000 years, very ancient cultures, and the government threatens to close this up. This brings up memories of how Australia itself was founded, the idea of Captain Cook coming to plant the flag, the British flag, and claim it for the Queen in England, declaring the land vacant under the idea of terra nullius, is vacant, not recognizing people, indigenous people, as humans, and so maybe in some cases classifying them as fauna and flora. or savages not entitled to recognition. Now you see a kind of connection between these three events that I just referred to. All are a quest for emancipation, struggle, justice, equality. In the case of the first, George Bush's declaration of the New World Order, from his own viewpoint as an American, would be understood by other Americans who think like him, even though many Americans also object to the, to the whole concept and particular aspects, constituent aspects of that concept. But particularly people outside of the American context, particularly in the Middle East, where these military actions were taking place, were perceived quite differently. So would it then be a coincidence that on the 11th of September, 10 years after George Bush Sr. declared that the New World Order is more than one for a small country, but for the world and Latin America and so on and so forth, that there was an attack, a terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in America, the Pentagon and other places, killing almost 3,000 people. That was 11th of September 2001, 10 years after he said it was a big idea, and 11 years after he first made that address before the joint session of Congress. Now, one person's terrorist, they say, popularly say, is another person's freedom fighter. Well, probably the same way Nelson Mandela was declared a terrorist by Margaret Thatcher, and of course the whole world came to celebrate him a few years down the line. So you see, humanity has this common aspiration for equality, for recognition, for dignity, whether in the case of George Bush leading the efforts to push back Iraqi aggression against Kuwait and those that came along with him, or in the case of those people in India, the Indians in South Africa at the time who rejected the South African government's apartheid government regime's idea of restricting their movements and declaring them as unequal. By the way, in 1884, Gandhi had led a delegation to see President Kruger of South Africa. And that's where you see a manifestation of the way people's ideas of the world affects the way they treat others, diversity. To quote what Gandhi said in his book, he said, the leading Indians were taken aback when they came to know how events had shaped themselves. They went to see President Kruger, who did not so much as admit them into his house, but made them stand in the courtyard. After hearing them for a while, he said, you are descendants of Ishmael, and therefore from your very birth bound to slave for the descendants of Esau. As the descendants of Esau, we cannot admit you to rights, placing you on an equality with ourselves. You must rest content with what rights we grant you. Gandhi personally did not take offense at Kruger because he said this gentleman was nursed from childhood to believe that some races are superior to others. And he genuinely believed this in goodwill. He was even charitable to allow the Indians into his courtyard. Of course, he could not allow them in because of that way of thinking. So, in a similar way, the Australian government probably is still locked up in that idea of the Western civilized nations are superior to the Aboriginals. So it governs and controls and decides to terminate their 50,000-year-old history by abolishing their communities, as it is trying to do right now. We hope it doesn't. And the Brazilian government also having difficulties managing those who, under the guise of the nation state, have bought ancestral land, and balancing the rights of these indigenous people who can never give up the claim to the ancestral lands, if anything. Well, these are issues that highlight the need for a consistent theory, way of thinking, and construct the models of structuring the world where the aspirations of humanity for equality, justice, and peace are met, not making some people's humanity contingent upon the dehumanization of others. This is where cognitive justice comes in. The right to the equal recognition and treatment of different identities as equal. What the world lacks is a political philosophy which articulates a construct that balances these aspirations and meets them equally. The history of empire and domination of peoples over others, ideas over others, has a very strong hold on the world. So to decolonize that way of thinking, to unthink those ways of thinking, requires significant dissemination of these ideals, and that's what cognitive justice seeks to do. The political philosophy of cognitive justice, which I develop in my book, articulates a vision of the world where the construction of order assumes a counter-hegemonic approach. But first of all, the ideas of suppressing or subjecting some people to others is first tackled. So these are the issues we focus on, and we will continue to expose them, to talk about them, to write about them, to advocate about them. The structure of the movement for cognitive justice itself is conceived to work towards this ideal, so that potentially we have a pentagonal idea of the structure of the world. This is what we will talk about subsequently and is adequately explored in the book. Pentagonal in the sense that there are 5 levels. You have the nation, which we redefine not in the sense of the nation state, but in the sense of identity. So long as the people have those attributes that were used to define a nation by any anthropological perspective, say have a language, a homeland, a distinct culture, some sort of claim to autonomy, and by all means, by all objective standards, they should be recognized. The nations, regions, that's groups of nations that have things in common. Then you have the state. We think the idea of the nation state is a very dangerous tool, which has been used to really suppress, marginalize, and wipe out identities, promote sometimes genocide. I need not make reference to some states which have been accused of genocide. Well, Sudan is top on the list with the Darfur area and all the different conflicts that led to the separation of Northern Sudan and Southern Sudan. The nation-state construct enforcing sovereignty can be a tool for wiping out dissent. So the idea of nation-state is replaced in our vision of the pluriversal world order with a plurinational state. The plurinational state is a state which acknowledges the multiplicity of identities within its purview and draws legitimacy from the consent of these people. Unlike the hegemonic nation state imposed from top down, you need not speak, you have no voice. Down there, the authorities, whether the European colonialists or their successor elites, impose what you should simply say yes to. And of course, that has caused a lot of friction. Then above that, you have the supranational union, what we propose as a supranational union. And finally, the Pluriversal Global Assembly as a replacement for the United Nations. Kofi Annan said the United Nations is unsustainable, needs radical reform. Professor Joseph Schwarzberg also has come up with this weighted voting system, and you would see different scholars have talked about the need for reform of the world order. Hannah Newcomb talks about the need to move away from the empire vision of the world, way of constructing the world. We need true democracy in building the world order. That is what cognitive justice aspires to. So, once again, we commiserate with all those who have been victims of wars. The Iraq War, the 2001 9/11 attacks, the invasion of Iraq, Afghanistan, and other countries by the West, and those who have died, victims of ways of thinking and constructs that make people and institutions to clash. And also to the native Guarani peoples in Brazil and the 270 Australian Aboriginal communities threatened with closure by the Australian government. We give our voice in support of your right to be recognized as equals and to have your voice in framing the construct of what becomes you. The music in the background has been Bob Marley, One Love. Humanity is very much capable of love. And that's a message that should inspire our thinking. With this approach, we believe the world can be made a better place. Thank you. We welcome more of your constructive feedbacks. And of course, my wearing the gown is my choice because I want to. So thank you, and we look forward to your comments. And let's spread the one love, like Bob Marley says. Thank you.